Welcome to Carrickfergus Vineyard, a place of hope where lives are changing. We're a church in the heart of Carrickfergus, passionate about seeing people's lives changed by the love of Jesus.
Over the last couple of weeks
The following message was given at one of our Sunday services.
And I found it really encouraging actually to hear from various people in this church who have shared. So thank you all who have shared. It's been really interesting. For those who perhaps don't know me or maybe we haven't met yet, my name is Jenna and I've been coming to this church for a little while now. And I spoke last year and here I am again, and it is a great privilege, an absolute privilege and a pleasure to be here. So thank you to Chantel and Paul for allowing me to come and share some of my thoughts this morning. But since I last shared last year, I need to update you on my own life. Because from last year, I have actually become a bit of a bookworm. Who would have thought it? I'm not sure if it's an age thing. You guys watch out. Once you get into your 30s, you apparently become a bookworm. Or maybe it's just I have discovered some really, really good books. Or perhaps maybe I've just had some really good recommendations. I'll let you decide. But one thing I know for sure is that my Carrick College teacher, English teacher, would be so proud of me for voluntarily lifting up a novel and reading it in my own time. I really should have done it at school, but hey-ho, here we are. But one book that recently captivated me was a book called, let me get it, Run, Baby, Run. Has anybody read it? It is a book about the story of Nicky Cruz. And this is a really captivating book. I highly recommend it. You can borrow it if you wish after today. But this is a story all about a man called Nicky, who goes from being this violent gang leader to being a pastor. And it's quite an incredible story. And what I love about this book is it includes all the gory details. If you're there for all the gory details, lift this book. It doesn't miss anything. And I love stories that include all the details. And if you know me well, if you're telling me a story about something, I am always inwardly fighting the urge not to ask more questions because I feel like I'll seem really nosy. So just know if you're telling me a story, I'm doing really well at not asking lots and lots of questions. But today, we are not going to hear about Nicky Cruz. We're going to hear about another life of complete transformation. A life from the Bible. And in the Bible, there are so many people whose lives we get to see in great detail. People like Daniel, people like David, and even Esther, who Jeff shared about last week. But today, we're going to look at a lady called Mary Magdalene. Her story isn't all laid out in one chapter or in one book. You have to dig for the details. And for someone like me, that's okay, because I'm nosy enough where I'll dig to find out. But when you dig for all the details, it is absolute gold. So a little bit about Mary. She was from, this is in my digging, she was from a place called Magdala. And from what I've learned, it's a fishing town. We meet her first in Luke 8, chapter 2. And a wee bit of context for where we are at this stage. Jesus has been baptized. He has been tested in the wilderness. He has begun teaching, healing, and performing miracles. And just before we're introduced to Mary, Jesus has been in the home of a Pharisee when this sinful woman comes into the home and she anoints his feet with perfume. Maybe some of you will be familiar with that. And then we go to Luke 8. And I'll read the line just before Luke 8. Jesus said to this woman, the sinful woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." And then we read, after this, Jesus travelled from one town and village to another, proclaiming good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been cured of evil diseases and spirits. And then we hear her name. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. What an introduction to somebody. Like, quite an introduction if you ask me. Here was this woman who had been obviously tortured with these demons that were within her. And because I'm a bit of a visual learner, and when I read, much to my husband's absolute despair, I read out loud because it helps me visualize the story. So if I'd read a book, so has Peter, bless him. But when I read this, I couldn't help visualize like what her life would have been as she was filled with these awful spirits. I can imagine it was a life of absolute horror and torment. Can you imagine? And then in one encounter with Jesus, he heals her, he restores her, and he sets her free. From that moment, Mary becomes a woman who traveled with Jesus and his disciples. She's a follower whose life had been completely transformed. Blows my mind. And then we hear next about Mary, and I'm going to move over to John just because I really like John. But if we go to John 19, we hear about her again. And we hear about Mary at the cross now. So she's been cured of her evil spirits, and now we meet her at the cross. And I think this just speaks of her absolute devotion in her relationship with Jesus. And here in John 19, verse 25, Jesus had been placed on the cross, and now we hear, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and, you guessed it, Mary Magdalene is there. And it blows my mind that there she was, stood at the cross. Again, visual learner. I tend to think of what that scene would have looked like. Can you imagine the horror of being at the cross where your friend had been crucified, your absolute Lord had been obviously crucified, the brutal torture that he had gone through, and then the death. And at this moment, we hear that she is stood faithfully at the cross. Now, at this stage, we don't hear her speaking. But to me, when I visualize the torture, and I would say a fairly scary scene, I would probably want to run a mile, I'm ashamed to say. But here we hear that Mary stayed. She didn't run when it was dark and probably full of fear and really scary. Her presence just speaks volumes because she stayed when it was dark and probably seemed quite hopeless. Her loyalty to Jesus shines through. We then move on to John 20 and some context. At this stage, Jesus had died. He had been buried and placed in a tomb. And then we read, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, I imagine it was really early, for those early birds you'll know, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciples, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken my Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." I think you can almost hear that urgency, like the anxiety flowing through her body of the fear of, where on earth have they put Jesus? Little side note, I have to tell you, I imagine that it's like when you lose something or lose someone. Do you know that adrenaline rush that flows through your body? I imagine that's what Mary is actually experiencing right in this moment. A number of years ago, this is another side note, stick with me. A number of years ago, we went to Hillsborough Forest Park. I don't know if anyone's been before. It is beautiful. There is a beautiful lake. There is this forestry. It is so picturesque. Well, we went with a group of friends and we were all dandering through having the best crack, let me tell you. It was January, it was crisp, but there was even little snowflakes in the... Maybe I'm exaggerating. But anyway, it was beautiful. If you've never been, that's another one to go to. Anyway, as we're dandering along, I suddenly thought, I have 2 children. And I'm scanning through various other children who we brought with us, with their parents too. And I thought, I can only see the wee one. So I said to Peter, have you Joshua? Because we had sort of separated out. And he looks, no, have you? No, I don't have him. We've seen the other adults. Anyone got Joshua, the children? Anyone seen Joshua? No. So in that moment, I looked across the water and I thought, oh heavens. And then I looked into the forestry and I thought, I have no idea which one's worse. And in that moment, I probably on the outside looked quite calm, probably like now, when really I'm not. And I thought, oh my word, we have lost Joshua. The adrenaline that swept through my body was huge. And I was like, I've lost him. All the other adults seemed to scan out to go find him. I stood just gouldering his name to no avail. But thankfully, Brian, who was there, came sauntering back with Joshua, who had dandered off to the park to play, apparently. But in that moment, the fear and the adrenaline that swept over my body was like no other. If you've ever lost anything or lost something of significance, you will know the feeling. And I imagine for Mary in this moment, when she goes to the tomb, she looks inside, I imagine that feeling sweeps over her body as the fear just captures her. And she goes running to go and try and find someone to tell. And she meets Peter and the other disciple from the tomb, both who came running as well. And they ran to the tomb and they went in and see the linen strips that were there. And in that moment, they also realized that Jesus was not there. And then in verse 10 of 20, John 20, I love this line at the end of this little bit. It says, then the disciples went back to where they were staying. That just leapt off the page to me. It just made me laugh. Maybe it's just me. But then we move on to John 20, verse 11. And this is the moment that changes everything. Sorry, from 11 to 18. The other disciples had gone back. And now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels, one at the head where Jesus had been and one at the foot. They asked her, woman, why are you crying? Oh, sorry, I've lost my place. They have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him. At this, she turned round and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not recognize him. He asked her the same question, woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for? Thinking he was a gardener, which also made me laugh. She said, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him. And I love that line because it just shows the relationship that she clearly had with Jesus. Wherever it is that he is, I will go. I am prepared to go to the lengths to go and get him. And then in that moment, the moment that changes everything, Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned towards him and she cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. Jesus said to her, don't hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things. I am just blown away by this passage and this encounter of Mary with Jesus. I love that in that moment when he spoke her name, she instantly knew it was Jesus. Mary is the first to see the risen Jesus. And a little bit of context to what that might have looked like at that time. In that culture, women were not considered credible witnesses. And they were actually considered second-class citizens. It's a bit hard to swallow, but they were. But Jesus chooses her to be the first person to see him alive. He speaks her name, Mary, and her whole world once again changes. She knew the voice of her Lord. Mary's life is a story of complete transformation. A transformation that can only happen through Jesus. She had gone from a life of torment with those evil spirits to peace through Jesus. From this bondage to complete freedom with Jesus. She was loyal to Jesus even in his death. And then she was honored by being the first to see him in his resurrection. Maybe today, like Mary, you need to be reminded that Jesus sees you. He knows your name. And he's still calling you. Maybe you've been in a relationship with Jesus for a long time. He's still calling you. I wonder if the band could come back up just before I close. In this book that I mentioned at the very start, Run Baby Run, the author, Nicky Cruz, who it's based on, says this line within it that literally jumped off the page to me. And I jotted it down because I thought it was of such significance. And he says this line, Jesus restores everything, even the most painful parts of our story. And let me tell you, I am guilty of pushing stuff down that I think I ain't touching that. But Jesus restores everything, even those really painful parts. Mary's life reminds us that no one is too far gone for Jesus to reach. It also reminds us about faithfulness in those quiet moments. When I imagine Mary stood, perhaps silently, full of absolute sadness and anxiety, I imagine, at the foot of the cross, watching her Lord be crucified. Her faithfulness shines through in those moments, in those quiet moments. Her life also teaches us that Jesus delights in the ordinary people. He delights in ordinary people, to use ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Think about Mary and the news that she brought. I have seen the Lord, and everything was changed. And I asked myself this question, and I wonder, will you ponder it too? Are you listening for your name? In whatever it is, your circumstance, are you listening? Because he's calling. And maybe you have had a relationship with Jesus for quite a while. But I get it. Maybe disappointments have left you weary. When you turn towards him, just like Mary did, I want you to imagine that moment outside the tomb when she turned towards him and everything changed. This is the power of Jesus, from that darkness to light. It was true for Mary Magdalene. And from what I read, it's also true for Nicky Cruz, but I'll let you read that and discover it. It can be true for you, and actually it can be true for me. I imagine this question, and as we read about Mary, I wonder if someone had have said to her, Mary Magdalene, when you turn towards him, your life will never be the same again. So I ask myself that question. Jenna Briggs, when you turn towards him, your life will never be the same again. I wonder, will you put your name in that sentence? When you turn towards him, your life will never be the same again.
Thanks for listening to the Carrickfergus Vineyard podcast. If you'd like to find out more about our church, please visit our website at carrickfergusvineyard.org.